Once upon a time, there was a little engine called Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it. The driver won't choose you again, they said. He wants big, strong engines like us. Edward had not been out for a long time. He began to feel sad. Just then, the driver and fireman came along to start work. The driver looked at Edward. "Why are you sad?" he asked. "Would you like to come out today?" "Yes, please," said Edward. So the fireman lit the fire and made a nice lot of steam. Then the driver pulled the lever and Edward puffed away. "Look at me now." The others were very cross, being left behind.
That was the beginning of a story called Edward's Day Out, in which a small steam engine called Edward was allowed out after being stuck for a long time. This story was created from the mind of a reverend living in England, with a 2-year-old son sick in bed with measles. The boy and his father shared a love of trains, and the former would often listen to stories about trains, usually told by the latter. The child's name was Christopher, and on one particular night, he was looking at a small drawing his father made for him, which showed 3 engines in a shed. The engine on the left and the middle seemed happy, but the one on the right looked sad. Naturally, Christopher asked his father why the engine on the right looked sad, to which his father replied that the engine was old and had not been used in a long time. Christopher then asked his father what the old engine's name was, to which the father responded with Edward. And from that point forward, nobody knew it just yet, but the foundation had been laid for a legacy that neither one could comprehend. Christopher's father had been an avid train enthusiast all his life. Growing up near Box Station in southwest England, he recalled in an interview that he could hear the night goods stop at Box Station, whistle for another engine to help it up the hill, and then hear the 2 engines working together to get the heavy goods train up and over the hill. He knew that steam engines had personality, despite them obviously being inanimate objects that were used for industries. So when he came up with the story of Edward the Old Engine, he harnessed that feeling of understanding a steam engine, knowing how badly it's been treated, and what it has to say. Christopher liked the story his father told so much he'd often hear it every night, and correct his father whenever he made a mistake about the continuity. Christopher's father often wrote down the stories on a piece of scrap paper so he wouldn't forget them. Then Christopher wanted to learn more about Edward, the other engines he lived with, and the railway they worked on. Eventually, Christopher's mother urged the father to publish the stories, believing they could sell well. Initially, Christopher's father said no, believing it wouldn't sell as well as Christopher's mother thought. But after some time to think about it, Christopher's father surrendered and decided to find a publisher for his stories. After a few publishers saying no, the family finally found a publisher, Edmund Ward Limited. But before Christopher's father could publish his book, Edmund Ward said that there needs to be a 4th story, as the 3rd story was about an engine who went into a tunnel and got stuck there. The publishers wanted a happy ending so kids wouldn't, become terrified of enclosed spaces. So, Christopher's father wrote one more story where the engine comes out and helps a fellow engine in need. After going through all the trouble, on May 12, 1945, a new children's book hit shelves in bookstores across the UK. This book was called The 3 Railway Engines, and the writer of these books? A man by the name of Reverend Wilbert Awdry. Awdry never expected the books to sell, but to his surprise, the books received critical acclaim by kids and grown-ups alike. So Wilbert Awdry decided to write another. This one was about a smaller engine based on a small toy he made for Christopher. When Christopher received his new toy, he looked the little engine over and gave it a name. That name was Thomas. When Wilbert's second book, Thomas the Tank Engine, released, it launched his books from successful into super duper mega ultra awesome success, I guess. The main synopsis of Thomas the Tank Engine was simple. Thomas is a shunter at the big station, always preparing trains for other engines without being able to take one of his own. So he takes his frustrations out on a bigger engine called Gordon, who was introduced in the first book. So Gordon gets back at Thomas by taking him with the Big Express, and Thomas learns a lesson not to be too much of a practical jokester. Next, he tries to pull a passenger train when another engine is sick, but he leaves the coaches behind after being too impatient. Okay, maybe Thomas isn't the best at pulling passengers. maybe he'll be better with a goods train. So Thomas takes a goods train, and he gets pushed down the big hill by the trucks, almost crashes through some buffers, which are tools designed to help stop the railway. I think Thomas is just bad at his job. Thomas is scolded severely by the man in charge of the railway, Sir Topham Hatt, otherwise known as the Fat Director. Thomas is told to stay in the yard for a while to learn how to handle trucks. While Thomas learns, he spots a runaway engine going much too fast. As soon as he gets the news that the runaway engine crashed, Thomas wastes no time getting the cranes and workmen needed to help this poor engine back on the track. Once Thomas and the hurt engine arrive home, Thomas is rewarded with his own special line to pull passengers and goods. Thomas's book ends and shows kids that being good will get them far. A pretty simple book concept, right? Well, yeah. But that's what made it so popular. Kids have some sort of fascination with trains. Think back to a time when you saw a train as a child. That seemed like the coolest thing ever, right? Well, Audrey harnessed that coolness of trains and made them even more cool. Thomas's book drove Audrey to make another, and another, and another. By 1972, 27 years after the first book, Wilbur Awdry published his final book and humbly retired from writing. And for about 10 years or so, that was the end of Audrey's world. That was until a certain British filmmaker by the name of Britt Allcroft came up to Wilbur and asked him if she could possibly adapt his Railway series books into a television show. Wilbur was hesitant since he had tried to make a television adaptation before, and that went just about as well as the Bay of Pigs invasion. The Bay of Pigs invasion, Spanish Invasión de Bahía de Conchillos, sometimes called the Invasión de Bahía de León, was a failed military operation on the southwestern coast of Cuba in April of 1961 by the United States of America and the Cuban Democratic Revolutionary Front, consisting of Cuban exiles who opposed Fidel Castro's Cuban Revolution and were directly financed by the U.S. government. The operation took place during the height of the Cold War, and its failure influenced the relations between Cuba, the United States, and the Soviet Union. Britt, however, assured Wilbur that this would be a much more professional production. Wilbur caved and made sure Britt knew he still wanted creative control, as he said, once the Americans get a hold of it, it'll be vulgarized and ruined. Oh, Wilbur, if only you knew. So, back to Britt. She founded a production company called Clearwater Features, which specialized in stop-motion animation and using models on sets, perfect for what she envisioned the show's medium to be. Clearwater co-CEO David Mitton would step forward as the show's director. Next, she hired two musicians by the name of Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell to write the score for the show, which went so much harder than it needed to. Finally, Britt needed a narrator in order to tell the stories to an audience. It was much cheaper hiring one voice artist rather than at least 10. So, who did Britt hire to narrate these children's stories? A man by the name of Ringo Motherfucking Starr. Why? Because he's Ringo Motherfucking Starr, and that he had the ideal, calm British narrator voice. At first, Ringo was a little bit hesitant since he thought all the kids cared about were spaceships and Star Wars, but he was soon smooth-talked by Britt into sending his voice for the entire first season. In 1983, a test pilot was shown to TV executives, and the series was greenlit for 27 episodes. This pilot was thought to be lost to time for quite a while until recently when the footage was dug up, rescanned, and put back together again, along with Ringo's old narration of the series. Finally, after all that, on October 9th, 1984, Wilbur Awdry's books were brought to screens all over Britain. The show's name, you may have heard of, was none other than